the ABA's Law Student Division. My name is Kareem Aref. I'm the chair of the American Bar Association's Law Student Division and a third-year law student at the University of California, Davis School of Law. And with me, or I'll be serving as the moderator today. Joining me today is the Honorable Frank J. Bailey from the United States Bankruptcy, he was a United States bankruptcy judge from the District of Massachusetts. Benjamin Higgins, who's a law clerk to the Honorable Frank J. Bailey in that same United States Bankruptcy Court in Massachusetts. And Colton Tooley Doyle, who is a judicial intern to the Honorable Michelle Childs from the U.S. District Court for the District of South Carolina and the University of South Carolina School of Law. Now, during today's presentation, we'll cover tips for getting hired as a judicial intern and extern. What does it mean to be a judicial extern or intern? And what is expected of you as a judicial intern or extern, as well as some best practices. Now, before we get things started, I'd like to remind law students that the ABA membership is free for law students. And the ABA has just introduced a premium benefits plan, which includes a savings of $250 on Barbary. For a $25 sign-up fee, you also get a $25 discount on West Academic Casebooks and a legal ethics bundle, which includes a free Model Rules of Professional Conduct ebook. I'd like to also encourage you to join the ABA's Judicial Division and its lawyer conference. As part of the ABA membership, law students may join up to 5 sections, divisions, and forums for free. And within the Judicial Division, the Lawyers Conference is home to lawyers, court managers, legal teachers, writers, publishers, and law students interested in the advancement of the judiciary. All right, let's get started with the internships versus externships.
So just quickly to define the two, everyone will probably refer to it as an internship, but there are differences. Externships are experiential learning opportunities that are provided by educational institutions to give students short practical experiences in their field of study. They involve companion course as well as field work, and they are, there's a rule in the ABA that distinguishes the two. Internships are generally not for course credit, and while they do have slight differences, the actual work that you'll be doing for the judges is not much different. And for today's purposes, we'll be using both terms interchangeably, but just understand that there is a difference.
All right, next we're going to move on to some tips for getting hired as a judicial intern and extern. Just want to say welcome, everybody. This is Ben Higgins. So we're going to just run through these quickly. The first thing is that there really is no uniform process for getting hired for a judicial internship. Externship might have a little more organization to it if it's through your school, but for an internship it can vary largely depending on the preferences of the judge, and that's something we're going to, a theme that's going to come up a lot today is things vary a lot depending on the particular preferences of the judge. So the fact that there is no uniform process, you can use that to your advantage if you start early and really take initiative. As far as how you can find out about internships, judges may post openings. It might be word of mouth. You might meet a judge at a reception or some other public networking event, but it can really vary a lot. Colton, how did you actually end up with your internship?
So yeah, I think to reiterate the taking initiative, and if my experience helps anyone, so I knew my school has a director for externships and internships, and they encourage it. You know, they encourage them when you first come in. So I went and met there so that I could understand what the difference was between an externship and internship. I talked with other students to try and develop a short list of judges, and ultimately, you know, through a process of talking with other professors, the fall of my 2L year, I was fairly set on working for Judge Childs. I spent the rest of my 2L year making sure that I had the best developed packet with, you know, letters of recommendation for, if anything, at least character references. and the goal being that if I could preempt any questions that the judge might have about me, that the initial interview to, just so that we could meet face to face was really just a formality. And I think it's important to remember that these are competitive in that they're limited. Judge Bailey and Judge Childs and many other judges only have so many spots for people to come in. For example, we had a girl come down from New York to South Carolina for 2 months because it's just such a good experience. But Ben, I know that you also interned, so I'm sure that you went through a process as well.
Sure. Mine was a little more ad hoc. Judge Bailey had a law clerk who went to the same law school that I did, and he actually reached out to my bankruptcy professor to see if she knew of anybody that was interested in an internship. And really, I happened to ask her around that same time if she knew of anything. So the point about just using any connections available to you is really important. You never know what's going to turn into a connection or an interview. So talk to professors, go to networking events, attend things like this webinar, and especially that point about going to your career services office can be very helpful. You can see what past students have done from your law school. Also, this last bullet point here, you touched on that a little bit, Colton, about just getting your materials in order early. Perfect your cover letter, your resume, make sure there's no typos, talk to people who will serve as references for you. That stuff can really put you ahead of some other candidates if you can get that stuff organized early, really as soon as possible. And bring it to your career services office and have them review it, because they can pick up on things that you might not be aware of when you're putting it together. Judge Bailey, are there any points about hiring interns or getting hired for an internship that,
Sure.
That you think might be valuable?
Sure. I thoroughly encourage you to approach a judge that you might want to intern for at an event. If you see the judge there, here in Boston, the Boston Bar Association has a number of events each year where law students are invited to attend, and you can go online and you'll see that which judges might be there, and just have in mind, I'm going to make sure I go introduce myself to that judge and ask, are there any opportunities in your chambers this semester, next summer, whenever you're available. And as Ben can tell you, I have regularly come back from those events with business cards or having given out my card to a number of students or given my email address to those students. I consider it to be, showing the kind of enthusiasm. In other words, I'm not put off by it. I think, and I don't know any judges that are. They may say no, I'm all filled up for the spring, or I'm all filled up for next summer. And every judge has in mind, how many students they can accommodate and still have them have a positive experience. But and then if the summer's filled up and you can do it next fall, then you can have that discussion. And if nothing else, you might get a chance to go in and be interviewed by the judge and by the law clerks. Maybe they'll say, we're really filled up now, but I think there's a lot of value in running through that process for the next time, so you've got sort of one under your belt.
All right, maybe so now we'll move on to what does a judicial intern or extern actually do? Judge Bailey, so what do interns actually do for you?
Well, it really I would say there are two large categories of work that interns, and I don't really know what an extern is so much, but we call them all interns, although sometimes they have gotten credit and sometimes they've even found funding sources and they'll get paid. But there are really two categories of things that they do: court work and non-court work, meaning bar association into. And sometimes it's not even, it's more general court-related work. So to be specific, when they, I'll always get the intern involved in my hearings. I always encourage them to come to court with me and in advance to work on preparation for that day's hearings or trial, to sit down with me and to talk over any issues that we might expect to come up at the hearing or trial. And then after the hearing or the trial day is over, often we'll sit down and talk about what work might have come from it. So questions that might have come up at the trial or now we expect to come up at trial tomorrow. We go into court, find out that tomorrow at the trial somebody's going to call their spouse, as a witness, and whether the lawyers are thinking of it or not, we want to be thinking about things like the spousal immunity or the husband-wife privilege or things of that sort. And I'll make sure that I'm kind of ready for that, and I'll often ask the intern to help me get ready for it. The other big category of work, as I say, is non-court related, for that I usually have some ABA, or in our world ABI or NCBJ, all these alphabet organizations, and I'll ask the interns, maybe for the whole summer that they're here or the entire semester, to work on a research writing or presentation challenge that I have coming up. And then sometimes there are court-related things that are not case-related. So we do an annual event in the fall where we invite new lawyers, 1 through 5 years, to come in to meet the judges, the bankruptcy judges, magistrate judges, district judges, and sit at round tables and talk about issues, so we get to know them and they get to hear from us. And we've done hypotheticals for discussion purposes, and I've had students work on preparing those and then have them come to the event. So those are categorically the kind of things that we're doing.
Right. Yeah, I think it makes sense to point out here that it's probably going to vary a lot what your actual assignments might be, depending on what judge you work for and how they use interns and what they're going to do. But it's very likely that whatever judge you end up for, unless it's a purely observational internship, you're probably going to be doing some legal research and some writing. So those skills, which I'm sure you're working on if this is in your first year or even your second year, but those are things to really focus on. Make sure you know how to use Westlaw or Lexis, that you're able to navigate, and also that you're able to write just a short bench memo if you have to. So being able to put your findings into a short, concise memo that tells the judge what you found and what your recommendations are, that will probably be universally applicable depending on what internship you have. You're going to be doing some research and writing for the judge, most likely.
Right. I can't imagine having someone be an intern, for any period of time where they aren't working on sort of short research and writing projects, and maybe 1 or 2 longer ones. Sometimes it's, like I said before, you're in the middle of something and you say, just go try to find the basic law on spousal immunity and don't even write on it, just come back in and talk to me. And then, tomorrow I'll ask you to give me a short memo on it so that, I keep it for my records or so that I have something to look at. But yeah, research and writing is certainly going to be part of the deal at all times. And attending court, I think that's part of my duty to you, is to make sure that you get to come to court and to observe what approach lawyers take to it on cases that now you're somewhat familiar with. So you can see the kind of judgments they make in preparing themselves and how have they decided to argue this? How have they decided to start it, argue it and finish it? How do different lawyers respond to the judge's questions on motions? That kind of thing. So that's another part of what you should expect to do. And in some ways, well, you can't insist on anything, but I think that you should make it known that you're anxious and enthusiastic about, anxious to attend court, just so that you don't get lost in the mix. Make sure that that's known. And a really good way to do that, by the way, is to keep in touch with the judge's courtroom deputy. Make sure you know what the week's hearing list looks like, so that you know what's coming up, because you'll surely always be welcome to come into court.
Colton, is this consistent with your experience with Judge Childs? Does she use interns the same way, or are there differences?
Yeah, I think that, as Judge Bailey said, the importance of being enthusiastic. I mean, and the interactions with Judge Childs were similar in that she wants to hear your opinion on a hearing. So, I suppose if I could, have a concentrated sentence, it would be that speaking up can go a long way. Like it's up to you to kind of take control of your experience there and saying, I would like to see this hearing, or I would like to do something of that. But that gets into expectations and so on and so forth, which I see as our next slide. So I'll let you guys take that away.
Well, let's jump into that. So, Judge, when an intern walks in the first day, what do you want from them in terms of the time they show up, their appearance, how they interact with you and your law clerks? What are you looking for?
Well, that's a great question, and I think that the intern, now they've been hired, so to speak, and they're coming, and they're either going to come full time because it's the summer, or they're going to come 2 days a week or something. The best thing they can do is to do their best to talk with the law clerks before they start, so they know what's the culture in your chambers. Does the judge have an open door policy? Is the judge going to be happy for me to walk in? Do I need to make an appointment to see the judge? How does he like to run things? And as far as appearance, your dress codes and all that kind of thing, ask about it. So I don't know that I've had to talk with a law clerk about the way they dress, but the way, I think the thing to do there, our court actually has a dress code for employees, and I think that that certainly applies to interns. If you probably could ask that, and I don't know, Ben, do you give that to them before they come?
We do have. The human resources people do give something on paper what the court dress code is. Generally, law students are more formal than what the dress code requires. So
That's right.
We've never had an issue with it. But use your common sense on this. Dress like you're going to court. Timeliness, show up on time, if not early. As far as levels of communication, it's important. We're going to get into this a little bit later, but if you have questions, or if you're not going to be there on time, if there's ever an issue, communicate that to the judge or to a law clerk. And if you're ever wondering if you should be doing something, err on the side of caution, at least initially, until you really have the lay of the land there.
Yeah, just remember, I think that we move quickly in these trial courts in particular, and so when you could come in on a Monday and there's no hearing scheduled, but all of a sudden, there's been an emergency filed over the weekend, and when you arrive on Monday, we're going to be in court all day, and you'd like to be there. Well, you need to be, ready for that, dressed for that. You need to have your mindset on that kind of a change. So it's important, I think, to be prepared for everything. And by the way, that's great preparation for being a litigator, trial lawyer, because you go to court, you go to the office on a on a nice sunny Friday in May, and you think, wow, this is going to be an easy day, and lo and behold, here comes a new TRO or something. So be prepared for all of those things.
How about as far as research and writing skills? We had talked before about it's very likely interns are going to be doing some researching and writing. How sophisticated are you expecting a law student, maybe just who finished their first year? Do you expect them to be able to write an opinion when they come in? What are you looking for from an intern?
No, not to write an opinion, certainly. I mean, I have had first-year law students after their first year here for the summer who could write a draft opinion, you know. And my approach to this is you work with Ben or you work with my law clerks, and it's kind of you work to your level. We want you to contribute at the highest level that you can and get the most out of your experience here. So I would never have somebody show up on day one and say, all right, here's the transcript and the briefs on this matter. I tried it for 4 days, and if you can, you know, by the end of next week, give me a draft opinion. You know, but that if you show ability to do that, if you seem to be ready for it and the right case comes along, yeah, you could assume that level of responsibility. As far as, you know, I think that you'll be prepared after first year with your legal writing program to write at a competent level for what we would generally need to see. So I wouldn't stress too much about that. If I have some resources that, you know, that I like, and sometimes if I feel like somebody needs help writing, either I or one of the law clerks, you know, will provide some resources to them on that, and also will go over something that a student has written to try to give helpful feedback. But again, we do move quickly, so a lot of times you're writing things that we recognize are not the kinds of things that you would write over a semester. I think it's just important to be, you know, to give the best work you can given the time limitations that you're facing. And I'll also mention that, you know, we are here, this is just unique to us, but, you know, we're a specialty court. You may not have had bankruptcy, and I do hire interns who have not had bankruptcy or secured transactions or the kind of things that we deal with substantively every day. But normally, you know, we can have you read the nutshell, we can have you read a horn book on a particular part of the bankruptcy code that we're dealing with, and you'll get comfortable with it. And much of what we do are just federal rules of civil procedure, federal rules of evidence, which are things that you're probably more prepared for, and you don't have to have specialty training to do.
So it sounds like if I'm a first-year law student, just finished my first year, finished my legal research and writing course, I might be able to contribute, or I'll get assignments, you know, commensurate with what my ability level is and my where I am in law school at that point in time.
Yeah, no question. And you know, we wouldn't bring in a first year who hasn't had bankruptcy, or a second year even who hasn't had bankruptcy, if we thought that we're really going to need them to do detailed bankruptcy work and they're not going to get a great experience otherwise. So we know what we're doing in terms of the skill level and experience level of the people that we bring in. It should not cause you not to apply, you know, to a specialty court, though. I encourage you to go ahead and apply to it.
And just to hit the last point there, which we've kind of moved into already, but you're there to help the court, but the court is also there, you know, the judge knows that you're there to learn as well. So don't be afraid. If you have questions, if you want feedback on how you're doing, speak up, ask the law clerk, ask the judge if you think that's appropriate. And remember, you're there to get work done, but you're also there to learn and develop as a young lawyer.
Right. I think that's an important thing to take away from this webinar is that you should feel, you know, I would ask the law clerks first, but again, I generally tell the interns, or at some point I tell them in their early part of their stay here, my door's open, and I want you to come in and ask me questions, any questions that you might have about the work you're working on. If you want to come in and tell me that you haven't had any evidence problem, and you'd really like to work on that, if you come in and say, I haven't done a dispositive motion with you and I would like to work on that, I want to know that. You can also talk to the law clerks about it, but you don't have to filter everything that way. You might feel more comfortable asking the law clerks, but just remember, everybody in chambers, in our federal system in particular, where we don't rotate, to different places or different, where we're always with the same people, we're always with the same law clerks and staff. Our law clerks know how we want the internship to go, and so it's perfectly appropriate, for you to talk to them, and they'll know the answers.
Well, now that we have a sense of what the judge is expecting from you, maybe we can get into some of the best practices, how we can succeed. So, Colton, how'd you do such a good job in your internship with Judge Childs?
Well, to rehash, as Judge Bailey said, being enthusiastic is always something that you should have, in your mind. You just went through a pretty lengthy process to get there, by just taking the time to research and going through all of the fingerprinting and everything else. So I think it's important to remember that if you're walking through the door, at least for myself, I left outside problems outside, so that when I came in, I walk in, and if Judge Childs is enthusiastic, Vincent's enthusiastic, Ethan's enthusiastic, they all want to be there. Ben and Judge Bailey, they want to be there. So it's kind of infectious. You should just always try and think like, all right, I'm very excited because this is such a unique opportunity. And things to keep in mind, if you're curious, is good rules to follow are doing what it takes to make the judge look good. You can't go wrong if you're doing what needs to be done to make the judge look good. And that's both in and out of chambers. You certainly don't want to go walking around saying, oh, I got to do this, or this is what happened in chambers today. You are representing your judge. Next is not getting so wrapped up in the competition. Fast does not necessarily mean best. You just, as Judge Bailey said, you just want to do your best work, and that's how you make the judge look good. And that you should remember, whether it's an intern or extern, that you're representing yourself and your school. Another important point is, as Judge Bailey said, is you're getting more responsibilities to write drafts. You need trust. The judge, I know Judge Childs specifically, she kind of starts you a little slow. She wants to make sure that you're comfortable, because this is a learning experience for you. So while you may not get to, write a masterpiece for your first couple of assignments, you can definitely build trust by communicating. For myself, my personal goals were to never surprise the judge, and that requires taking initiative. For example, every Monday, Judge Childs meets with her interns, her clerks. She asks you kind of where you're at. It's just a way for you to explain to everyone else and really get involved and know what's going on in the court, because it's a lot busier than you think it is. And communicating, even if it's a one-sentence email, goes a long way. So my emails on Monday morning, if I couldn't make the Monday morning meeting, was what I had completed last week and what I had assigned this week. That way Judge Childs knew if something needed to be adjusted, if there was a time-sensitive issue, if that bench memo needed to be done a little bit faster. She knew where I was. Ben said something about, your assignments may vary. I think something I always strived for was never having the judge wonder what I was doing. And if she came in to the library, I also, and this is another great thing, you really get a chance to practice being concise. I'm sure Ben, Judge Bailey, there are points when you really appreciate maybe if a clerk can summarize where they're at in 10 or 15 seconds. And that can go a long way when things are a little bit crazy in chambers.
Yeah, no, I think that communication piece is such a good point, and it's so important. You want to make sure you understand what the judge wants from you with every assignment. You want to be able to update your judge and just keep them informed, especially if you think it's going to take longer than you expect it to.
Right.
Communicate that. People, law clerks and judges, they will understand that, but don't not tell them about it. Don't, if he's expecting something in 2 weeks and that's 2 weeks go by, give him a heads up. If it's going to take you a little bit longer.
Right.
What Colt said about building trust with the judge, it's really important in what you write, that it's backed up, and also just letting him know where you are, or her, in the process.
Right. I want to echo some of that. It's much better for the judge if you come in and say, I told you I'd have this for you tomorrow, and I will have something to you tomorrow, but I feel like I could use another day, and I think that the product will be better. Let the judge, work through that with you. Just be open and don't be shy, and say, well, I'd rather, not mention it, and don't mention it, just bring it in late, or which I think is probably the worst thing you could do, or to not mention it and give the judge something that's not your best work. The judge may say, yeah, I really need it tomorrow, just get me what you have, and we'll take it from there. I understand you feel like you could do better if you had another day, but unfortunately we don't have that. So that's all communication. These are great skills to learn because you're going to have that problem with partners, with clients, with the judges in the real world when you're actually litigating.
If we can jump to the next slide, we have a quick list of just forward. Yeah, there we go. One more. All right. So just a quick list of helpful tips for how you can do well. And these are really just things you can adopt that will help you not just in your internship, but as you go forward as a lawyer. So for every meeting that you go to, every conference call, prepare for it in advance. The meeting doesn't start at the second the meeting is scheduled. It starts beforehand. And if you can come in prepared, you're going to contribute and get more out of it and bring more to the meeting itself, or the conference call, or the hearing, whatever it is. Take notes while you're there. It's shocking how quickly you forget stuff. So if you write it down, it can be very helpful later on. For emails, respond promptly, and if use the appropriate level of formality. And again, here's a point to err on the side of caution.
Let me just mention on that taking notes part. It always surprises me when an intern, walks in for a meeting that I've scheduled with them to give them a new assignment, and they don't have a pen and they don't have a pad, and I always, it's a teaching opportunity for me to say, throughout your career, when you're about to meet with a client or you're about to go meet a partner about a new case, go in ready to take notes. We live on that. So anyway, go ahead, Ben. I'm sorry.
Oh, no worries. That's very helpful. Another one, I think Colton gave us this one, but keep a list of questions for each project as you're going, things that you haven't completed yet that you need to resolve in order to have a finished product. That way you don't forget about them later. Treat every written assignment like it's a finished product. Ask yourself, are you okay with this going out published to the world, or would you be okay giving this to a paying client when you turn it over to the judge? You want to be comfortable that what you're giving the judge is your best work. If you make some kind of mistake or there's something you're missing, never cover anything up. As Colton said before, you're trying to build trust with your judge, and you're not going to hide everything forever. Your written work is going to outlast you, so make sure if there is some kind of hole or something you mess up that you bring it to the judge's attention, because most likely there's very little you can do that can't be fixed. So you just want to be open and honest about everything. And the last point here, look for opportunities to add value. Look for ways you can contribute to chambers. And one good way to do that is there's something that other people don't want to do, volunteer to do it and knock it out of the park. And that can be a real way that you can contribute to just the work of the court and to make your judge's life a little bit easier.
Let me talk about citation form just a little bit here. And here in Chambers, we're not blue book fanatics, but on the other hand, I sometimes get written material from law clerks or rather interns, where they won't include the date of the opinion, they won't include the specific district court or bankruptcy court where it's coming from, Southern District of New York or whatever, or it'll be a circuit court opinion. I know that, but they won't tell me what circuit it is. Those are really problematic, right? Those deficiencies, because if it's I'm in the First Circuit here in Boston. If I see a First Circuit bankruptcy case, that's binding on me. If it's a Fifth Circuit case, it isn't binding on me. And so it's enormously important for me to have all that information, not just from a form standpoint, but it helps me know what I'm dealing with. And a pet peeve of mine, and I think a lot of judges feel this way, what I call pin sites. So I don't only want to know the case, the volume number and the page that the opinion starts on. I want to know the pages on which the propositions for which you're citing that case are, where that information can be found. Because I really don't want to read a 60-page opinion for one small thing, but I do read the cases you cite to me. And so you can save me a lot of trouble by giving me that level of detail. And I don't know if this is the right time to say this, but stop by and say goodbye, at the end of the day when you're going to leave. If you're not working in Chambers, right outside the judge's office, or maybe even if you are, pop your head in and say, I'll see you on Tuesday. It's just me knowing that what if I've been thinking and I can't get away from my emails to say, oh, gee, I just wanted to mention one last thing to you, and then I find out you're gone. It's fine. You don't have to check in for everything. But if you do say check out for the day, it gives me the opportunity to say, great, I'll see you tomorrow, or hey, one more thing.
Great. Well, so those are some of the best practices. Maybe we can move on to some of the things. You mentioned some of your pet peeves, Judge, but maybe we can go into a little bit more detail with some of the worst practices. So what are some of the other things that you wish interns would avoid or come in knowing not to do?
Well, we've talked a lot about communication, and I think we've probably impressed upon everybody who's attending that, being fully open is a really important aspect of being well thought of as an intern. But so the other side of that is failing to keep people informed. I'm going to be in late tomorrow, I need more time. That's a negative. Appearing distracted is a really big deal for me. When you're there working, you need to send some emails out or text, to your friends or your family or something. Don't do that while you're sitting across from me, even if you're not talking. Put that phone away. Don't get distracted by those things. Again, I know everybody's life goes on, and I do it too, but not when it interferes with our work, and I find that particularly a bad thing to do. I've even had interns who will sit at their desk with their Beats on or their headphones in, and I consider that a really bad thing to do too, because I know some people say, well, I study well like that, but the reality is I feel like you're distracted. And so if you're not in front of me or not in the flow of Chambers and you're like in the library, I still don't think you should do it, but it's kind of forgivable. But I don't think it sends the right message. Be super careful about the way you relate to other interns, to the staff in the court, the courtroom deputy. We will hear from other members of the court family. If let me put it this way: when they like an intern, they just like them, they just enjoy having them here. I hear that all the time. Boy, we really love Ben. What a great addition to our chambers. If I don't hear anything about somebody, well, that probably means that you haven't mixed well with them. So focus on maintaining a very positive relationship, with everybody in chambers. People don't have to be friends, but they do have to be. It's nice if they have the kind of courtesy and respect that engenders positive feelings about them. So those are a few things, Ben.
No, those are helpful. I want to reiterate the point about the phone, just because we see it all the time. Put the phone away. I mean, it really just put it in the drawer and pick it up at the end of the day, because it's very obvious, and it's somebody a few years older than you doesn't see it the same way that you do, as kind of just this thing that's always there. They see it as you look distracted, you're not focused, especially with the headphones. So it's just an easy way to appear not focused, and in the appearance of not focused and being not focused, it's kind of a fine line, and it doesn't really matter to the who's ever viewing it. So if you can avoid that, it's just an easy thing to avoid. This point above here about allowing the perfect to become the enemy of the good.
Right.
This is for the perfectionists in the audience, the people who want to take every last minute to get everything right. And it's an admirable quality, but at the end of the day, you need to get things done in a timely fashion. And it's important to understand where you are in the chain of the work. If you're the intern, generally your work is going to be reviewed by a law clerk and then possibly a judge. And so there's a lot waiting on your work. You're kind of the first chain in the process, and you want to make sure you do your work well and accurate and clear and it's backed up, but you don't want to take forever doing it. At the end of the day, you need to fish and cut bait, and so it's important that you get things done without taking forever. I know it can be scary to turn that thing in, but you're going to feel better when you do, and you're not going to leave the judge wondering, well, when's he going to get that thing done?
So I want to add to that, Ben, because I think it's a very common issue for law students and for new lawyers, where you say, I just don't know if I've found everything. I don't know. I feel like there might be more out there. And at some point, you do just have to say, okay, I've done it, and I feel confident enough about it. And I myself, if I'm writing an opinion, I will sometimes go to one of my law clerks and say, I'm going to give you this draft. I'm just not making any more progress on it right now. And I think a fresh set of eyes, will help us advance the ball. It doesn't mean that I think that's all there is. It means that I think somebody else needs to work on it. And so you should know that doesn't stop after you've been doing this for 30 years. You still, sometimes you need to just say, okay, I'm done, I'm going to move on. I know, Ben, you have talked to me about once in a while law students don't know really how to present themselves in court. And we've talked about dress, but some of the other things, what kind of things have you observed where maybe interns don't quite know what their demeanor should be?
Sure. With this last bullet point, I apologize to anybody if this seems obvious, but they're on here because we've actually seen all of these things happen with interns. So don't chew gum. Never bring your coffee into the courtroom unless that's the courtroom culture there. But just as a default, don't do that. Try not to react to the lawyers. You're there representing the judge, and if you give some kind of indication that you think an argument is good or really bad, they're going to interpret that as the judge is giving that indication, and you don't want to be doing that.
Please underscore that. That's very,
right.
very important. Go ahead.
Yep. Oh yeah. I mean, just remember, you represent the judge in your appearance and all that you do, and you're an extension of the judge. So don't do anything that would put them in an awkward position. Hearings can be very long. Try not to yawn. And dress, we've covered dress. Just wear a suit, wear a jacket, and you should be all set.
Yeah, I mean, so if you need a break from a long courtroom proceeding and the judge, hasn't taken a break, doesn't mean you can't. So, go take a break, throw some water on your face, and, come back in. But the most important thing on that slide there at the bottom, I think, is don't react, because you may not mean anything by your reaction. So, but the lawyers even and the parties you came out from the back of the courtroom, with the judge. And so they're going to read a lot into that. It may affect settlement. It may affect the way the lawyer, whether they go on longer or they cut off, make their argument shorter. If they have a feeling that you are reacting in a way that, they're reading into it. So I try to have a poker face up there, and everybody in the courtroom that is with me, needs to not tip your hand about how you're hearing things.
So those are some of the dynamics in the courtroom. Why don't we move to the dynamics within chambers? So Colton, maybe you can start us off a little bit about how do you navigate, you're a law student, you're meeting with a judge who's senior with you, there's law clerks who, might be a couple of years ahead of you. How do you navigate that, walking in there the first day and then later on?
Right. I think, for the sake of saying it again, that speaking up is really, really important. If you're going in there and maybe you would like a little bit more work, or you're not seeing something, I think speaking up is really important, in that you shouldn't be worried about embarrassing yourself or anything like that, because you've gone through the process to get there. Judge Childs, Judge Bailey, whatever judge it is, they've picked you for a reason. So really going in there and like you said, just erring on the side of being cautious in the way that you represent yourself. You don't want to be, a dominant personality, but you also don't want to just be silent. Judge Bailey said, if I'm not hearing anything about you, then perhaps it's also not a good thing. And really just buying in. Judge Childs has a family atmosphere in chambers. We're all working towards a common goal, no matter how small. Everybody is there to work and really learn. And Judge Bailey and Judge Childs and Ben, I mean, you probably know this, like, it takes time to select an assignment that you think that a new intern can complete, and then reading behind it. And that leads into being able to take constructive criticism without being personally offended. Really getting in there and just being yourself, but knowing that this is about you, that these judges don't have to have these interns and externs, that you go in and you really capitalize, and showing your appreciation just by being enthusiastic. This is a little bit of foreshadowing, but Ben, I know that things worked out well for you with Judge Bailey, going from an intern to a clerk, but the way that I turned a 7-week externship into a 10-month internship is by speaking up and just saying, hey, I'd really appreciate seeing something else, or hey, if you have anything. And the judges are there for you. They want you to learn. Judge Childs is really about teaching you through a process of working on things that matter. So, going to lunches and being yourself and everything like that all builds trust. And Judge Bailey, I'm sure that you probably have a similar family atmosphere in your chambers.
Yeah, I think we do, and we are. The thing you need to know about chambers is it's small. It's a small group. Even if you have a number of interns, it's still a small group. And remember that a judge can talk about his or her cases with very, very few people, even other judges, perhaps they shouldn't talk about their cases, something in their case about. And so, you know, I can't go home and talk to my wife about my cases, not because she'll spill the beans, but because she, you know, she's not a lawyer. She's not going to understand perhaps what I'm talking about. So I can talk to my law clerks and my interns, and so it does become, you know, I try to keep it friendly and try to keep it personal to some extent, because I think that encourages everybody to say what they think. And I know we've said this probably 3 different ways, but you know, none of us are looking for somebody just to say, well, I think the judge wants it to come out this way, so I'm gonna get it there. I want you to challenge what I or the law clerks have told you, if your conclusion on the law is that it ought to be challenged.
A couple points I think we hit these a little bit, but I want to underscore them. You know, be positive, as Colton says, be courteous, be professional, and be respectful of people's time. As Colton said, it can be a lot of work to manage an intern or an extern. If you have questions, don't wait till the end of the day, because that person might be on their way out the door. So just go, you know, if you go early, go not right before they're going into a hearing or before they're leaving. You know, just try to be understanding that even your supervisors, you know, they have their own demands on them, and you want to be respectful of that, and you want to be positive. With that, maybe we can move on.
I think that goes back to the communication issue. You know, don't hand. I used to say this as a lawyer with associates working for me. You know, if I didn't give you a specific deadline, if you walk in on Friday at 5 o'clock and hand me something you've been working on for a month, then you have doomed me, you know, to working over the weekend without asking me whether I'm free to do it. You know, so and you can avoid all that just by telling me when you think you'll have something, and I can adjust, you know, when it's best for me to get it. So anyway, I know ethics is next, and it's really critical, Ben. So.
No, absolutely. So just a couple ethical issues to avoid or just to be aware of. If you have any connection to a case, to either the parties or the attorneys more likely, tell your judge right away, tell the law clerks. Never discuss the court work, anything you do on the court on social media. Best practice, probably avoid talking about the court, period, on social media. I would say the one exception, if you have a LinkedIn profile, you want to list your internship or externship, that's fine. But don't go, you know, tweeting about what happened at court that day or put it on Facebook. Just avoid it. You just think about, you don't want to reflect poorly on your judge, and that's a way to avoid doing that. Judge, are there any other ethical points that?
Yeah, I mean, so that social media business is really an important part of it, because it merely by saying, you know, I have to work late tonight on something, and you put that out on your Facebook page or something, that may tell people that what you're working on, and they're not supposed to know that. They may know, oh, the judge has an injunction, you know, that was just argued, and now here's this intern, and the intern has got to work late. What does that mean? Well, that's information they really shouldn't have. I did have an intern last year who we were, you know, half a day into a hearing, and later she said to me, oh, gee, you know, I worked last summer at this law firm, and I didn't work on this, but I know about this case from that. I mean, that was good for her to tell me. I could have maybe known earlier, but maybe she didn't appreciate it. But I went into the courtroom then after a break and said, I know you've seen this, you know, and I named her, you know, sitting in my courtroom, and you know, I'm disclosing to you that she isn't working on this. She's just here to watch, and she has communicated nothing to me about this matter. So that's all, you know, very, very important things. You have the ethical responsibilities of a law clerk. And when people start here, you know, I know Ben and our HR folks give you some things that you can bone up on, so you can read and know what those responsibilities are, and then come and talk to the judge or the law clerks or both, if you have any ethical concerns. If you're working here and now you're interviewing with a law firm, you need to disclose that to the judge. You'll be taken off all matters for that law firm for that moment. So again, just communicate and remember what it looks like. It doesn't matter whether that you really have a conflict and are acting on it. It just matters that it looks that way. Ben, writing samples, resumes. I know we've had some issues with that. Did you mention that already, or should you?
I haven't mentioned it. There's a bullet point there. If it's okay to use the court work for writing sample if your judge lets you. So if you ever have a question, just ask about it. Even if you don't have a question, if you intend to use work that you did for the court, ask the judge if it's okay. If you're never ever reference a specific opinion or identifiable information in a resume, we once had somebody list on their resume, completed a draft of X opinion, and then provided the case site. Don't do that. It shouldn't be traceable, the specific work that you did. You want to redact any identifiable information.
So we're like Las Vegas, right? Anything that happens here stays here. We really don't want there should not be insights about how we use interns, and certainly not what they've worked on.
Right. We have a link at the bottom to the law clerk manual that will lay out the ethics that law clerks are required to follow. And the important point here is really, as Judge Bailey said, if you have a question, ask the judge or ask the law clerk. We're running out of time, so maybe we can move on to the last topic here, which is where might your internship or externship lead? Judge, do you want to start us off?
Yeah, I'll be happy to talk about this. Always find out what some judges, and Colton maybe can tell us what Judge Child's policy is. Some judges say that when you're hired, you should know I don't hire law clerks from my folks that have been interns, that you're more or less excluded from that. If you take the internship, you're not going to be my law clerk, because they don't want to have overt competition among interns. I don't have that policy. Ben's an example. He came to me as an intern and has now been here, an extended year. I do 2-year term clerkships, but he's been here for 3. So I don't have that policy, but make sure you know about that. But if you go and do a good job, that judge will not rest until they help you get in your career where you want to be. So they will help you and recommend you if you've done a good job to their colleagues on the federal bench. I have recommended interns for law clerk positions at the district court. I can tell you now that unless there's something very odd going on, you'll almost always get the interview, if one of their colleagues calls and says, gee, Colton was here, he's a terrific guy, I don't hire interns, but this is a wonderful person who has applied for your job and did a great job for me, and here's what he did, and you're going to get an interview. So that's one thing it can lead to. The other thing that you should know is that employers, in my experience, I was a law clerk. It's almost like when you've been an intern, you've immediately got something to talk to the employers at the interview about. Maybe you can't tell them details, but you can certainly say, I interned for Judge Bailey, and what was that experience like? And they're enormously interested in knowing what these decision makers are thinking about and what the experience is like. So I think it's a powerful thing for your resume. I don't know why any law student wouldn't do it. And it certainly can lead to some very important things in your career. I also make sure that I bring my interns to any bar functions, and I'll introduce them around when I'm there to members of the bar who might be hiring, so that you can help open the door for them. So you want to take advantage of that as well. So that it can lead to a lot of very positive things. Everybody knows right off the bat that you have learned some basic skills, some important skills, and so they know that that's a positive in your resume just by having that experience of the internship in this case in a federal court chambers.
Well, I think we've hit all of our
time
topics.
is up. Yeah, our time's pretty much up. I don't know if Kareem, did any questions come through? Take another minute. Anything that you saw that you'd like to pose? Kareem? I'm not sure if maybe he's been disconnected. That's about all the time we have. So we can wrap it up.
Thank you, everyone, for attending. The webinar replay will be circulated to everyone in the next couple days. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.